Welcome to our program, You Get the Gist, a show where we hope to give you the flavor of some creative works that have been produced by people in our midst and some insight into their personalities and creative processes. Tonight, as our first guest, we have Dr. Gabrielle Watling, Professor of English at Endicott College. Welcome, Dr. Watling.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here.
Tonight, you're here to discuss your book, The Cultural History of Reading for World Literature. Can you tell me how is a cultural history any different from any other history that you might read?
There was some misconception at the beginning amongst our contributors that what we were asking for were literary histories, histories of a region's outstanding literary works or history of a period's outstanding literary works, and that wasn't what we were looking for. We were particularly interested in what people read at that time or in that place.
Is this the first time that you've edited a book?
Yes, it is.
So you didn't have any contacts to reach out to? All this was new to get these people
I had
contribute?
to learn on the job.
Who was your intended audience for this volume?
The intended audience is an undergraduate reader. It's a reference book. It will go into the reference section and supplement people's understanding of cultures and read the history of the book and that kind of thing.
What kind of course do you think would use it? It sounds to me that there could, not necessarily an English course or history, depends on topic.
Certainly. There is a great deal of cultural material there. So perhaps any of the sort of humanities/social sciences might be interested. There's psychological material, there's archaeological material, anthropological material. Any of those disciplines could find material that could help with an understanding.
So you had to become an expert in many fields.
Yes,
to determine if this is going to get included.
Sort of dabble in a few different places. Yes, because quite a few of the texts that our contributors talk about aren't fictional or creative texts. They're political texts or texts to do with a specific field of inquiry. So yes, we had to understand what texts they were talking about and why they had such a cultural impact at the time. And
how do you find people that you trust? Because if you don't know the particular topic...
Sure, that's a very good question. I started with people that I knew around the world. I started with people who I had known professionally, either through meeting them in other universities or working alongside them, and people that I work with here at Endicott as well. Some of the areas were very easy to fill. We found no end of contributors for South Asia, India, the subcontinent, Pakistan. We had to turn people away for that subsection. Some of the areas were impossible to fill. Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand. I had to do that subsection myself because I couldn't find anybody in the world who was willing to do that subsection. And that was an instance where I wrote cold to a number of academics in Southeast Asia, in universities in Southeast Asia.
So you had to piece together.
Exactly, yes. There was an awful lot of internet research to try and find who might be interested in a project like this and where they were. I didn't have a working knowledge of the universities in Indonesia. That was research that I had to do. So that was a
did you have trepidation about that, or
no? When I started the project, I thought, I won't have any difficulty finding people to contribute for this book, and in some cases I was right, but in some cases I was wrong.
Since this was the first book that you've edited, how did the project come about?
Sarah Quay approached me and she said that Greenwood had approached her and asked her to do this.
That's the publishing company?
Yes, Greenwood's the publishing company, yeah. Asked her to do the two-volume series, and she said she was quite happy to do the American volume, but she wanted someone who had a bit more international experience to take on the world volume. And I leapt at the chance. This was a wonderful opportunity for me, so I was more than happy to take it on.
Now, when you say international experience, you are an international person, but is your writing international also, or was it more your traveling?
My research, my dissertation research was into post-colonialism, so I was already fairly well prepared to understand literatures from around the world and reading habits and writing habits and publishing habits from around the world. So I guess that was where I drew from mostly.
What would you say is your favorite part of the book? Now that you're finished.
I'm biased,
Okay.
but the subsection that my friend Dr. Alison Bartlett wrote about Australia and New Zealand is superb.
And we should say why you have that bias.
I'm Australian.
Okay. Did any unexpected things come out of this writing for you? Not necessarily good or bad, but things you didn't expect to happen?
Yes, many. I suppose there was a sort of a curve where I began the project with tremendous confidence. You know, oh yes, you know, this is absolutely what I've been waiting for all my professional life. And then when it became clear that some of these subsections were not being filled, other people had finished their subsections. Greenwood was saying, we'd like to put this book together fairly soon, and I still didn't have anybody to do Russia. Then I realised what I'd taken on. I'd taken on the whole world. So one of the unexpected things was that it would reach a low, you know, that it would sort of reach a point where it actually became quite difficult. But that's when you get yourself into gear. That's when you call in all the resources. I was lucky to find a wonderful person to do the Russian subsection. Other things, you know, the gaps were filled in. Any gaps that remained, I did myself.
So that was your problem solving.
So some of my problem solving was saying, all right, do it yourself.
Okay,
Yeah.
well. How did your writing change from when you were a younger person to, I'm not going to say older person, more experienced person, a more experienced writer? What would you, since most of our audience is going to be college kids, how would you see that your writing has evolved?
I think that as young writers, we can't wait to write about the I. Every sentence begins with I, and the subject is often what we've experienced, what we think, what we want, what we have done, who we want to do it with, etc., etc. This was a situation where there was absolutely no room for the I whatsoever. And so you have to find a role where you can use your voice creatively, but write about something that is completely external to yourself and your own experience.
So it's still yours,
yes,
in some way?
Yes, but it's the only ownership you have is the tone of voice. And you don't even want that to be terribly strong. One of the subsections that I have here, it got a little late in the piece before I realised that the tone that the contributor had used was calling a lot of attention to itself. And I had the chance to tone the tone down, and I missed that chance. And it's in there as the contributor wrote it, yeah. And that's one of my regrets, actually, is that I would have loved to have gone back and just re-engineered that subsection.
So that'll be for the second volume. Right?
Yeah, when it goes into the second printing.
Right. Can you tell me how your teaching and your own personal writing are connected? If
oh, absolutely. I couldn't have done a project like this unless I had been a teacher. Because most of what I was doing was collecting people's work and editing it for final publication, which isn't very different from processing student work. And you have to find a voice that you can speak to the contributor in, and it has to be a constructive voice, and it has to be a voice that's firm but fair and fills them with confidence about the things that they've done well, but convinces them that they need to make changes.
So they don't say, forget it, I'm just withdrawing it, find it yourself.
Exactly, because there's not a lot of money in this kind of writing. Other than having yourself published, there wasn't a lot of impetus for these people to continue with what, you know, increasingly became quite a difficult project. So I had to, you know, sort of find that place where I could bring them along with me and keep their enthusiasm up and keep their energy up. Yeah. Wow. You're a coach.
And now they're going to be famous because they've been on our show. So maybe that will be some impetus for the next volume.
Well, they'd better be grateful. That's all I can say.
Okay. Thank you.